Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for beginning. And uh, why don't you just, now you've got the ball in your court, why don't you read the verse and just the first paragraph of the purport and add any additional comments, Govinda. And anybody, please just jump in if you have any questions, comments, just let it be free flowing and organic as much as possible.
Unprepared, but it's verse 10.
Yes, 10th
Okay.
verse, second chapter, first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Okay. Kamasya nendriya pratir labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jinyasa nartoyash cheha karmabhi. Life's desires should never be directed toward sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Purport: the completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed towards the fulfillment of desires in sense gratification. In such civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. In politics, social service, altruism, philanthropy, and ultimately in religion or even in salvation, the very same tint of sense gratification is ever increasingly predominant. In the political field, the leaders of men fight with one another to fulfill their personal sense gratification. The
Okay,
voter
that's enough. For just we'll take it paragraph by paragraph if you don't mind. Do you want to?
I'm
comment?
It's just one long paragraph, but it's not.
I see. I broke it up. I broke it up. Yeah.
Well, this is the material disease. This is what's promoted by all of our leaders, and it's what's purchased. It's what's being sold, and it's what's being bought. And everywhere you look, there are invitations to sense gratification. I was actually discussing a little bit last night with Ross Vilas about trying in discussions with some of my family members, trying to distinguish a cleaner break between the material and the spiritual, and that our lives really are to promote, to advance in our spiritual awareness, to put God first. And yet we spend so much time, I say to them, or attempt to say, concerning ourselves and really getting completely immersed in all manner of sense. I don't call it sense gratification. I just kind of say selfish activities. People are obsessed with going out to eat, with going up skiing, with going on trips. It's really like a fever. And, I can sense it among my close associates, a fever that's building with the pandemic. And people are just really wanting to get out and indulge. Whereas on the other hand, I think devotees are just fine with the confinement, because it doesn't limit you in any way in your ability to get very productively engaged in devotional service. I think with well-meaning people like in my church, in the Mormon church, there is a desire for spiritual life, but I think what's not recognized is that you can't make the kind of compromises that seem to be accepted. We're going to be spiritual people. We're going to love the Lord, but we're going to do lots of things that we like. I mean, we were given these senses to enjoy them, right? And so we're going to go ski a lot, and we're going to go out to dinner a lot. We're going to do all of these things so that we can, eat, drink, and be merry kind of thing. But it's fine. And, frankly, I'd be interested in some enlightenment on this. It's a little bit difficult if someone does not have like a taste of Krishna consciousness to be able to explain why that sort of soft border between material and spiritual, that ultimately just has you be a sense enjoyer, and you really can't, you really are foregoing true spiritual life, I think, if you're so compromised in the way you indulge your own senses. I'll leave it.
Kapil, you're also in the corporate world. Do you notice that same phenomenon, the fever for sense gratification, and maybe just sort of a passing concession to religiosity?
That's correct, Prabhu. Prabhu, there was this very famous or infamous school of thoughts in India. I think talks a lot about the corporate America, talks about the corporate world in general. The founder person of that philosophy, his name is Charvak Muni. And he says, Rinam Kritva Givat Pivat, Yavat Jivam Sukham Jivat, Bhasmit Bhustasya Dehasya Punar Janma Kuvat. So he says, so long as you live a happy life, incur a lot of debt, eat ghee, because once you die, there is no comeback. And I think this particular verse talks about that. It talks about almost the role reversal. Like a lot of people and religious practices, they say that, okay, God has given this to me. And since God has given, he also asked me to enjoy it to the extent possible. But I think that is basically a disservice understanding the philosophy and understanding who God is, because in third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says, okay, I got to a point, I know what you are trying to say about the karma, the buddhi yoga, but he said that then why people commit mistakes or why do they commit sins? And I think this verse, especially what Prabhupada has mentioned in the purport, explains that. He says that people often feel that this life is all about a battle that I'm fighting. But you are fighting a battle without knowing who the real enemy is. And this verse talks about the who is the real enemy. It talks about the lust. And then some people say, okay, now I know that it's lust, it's this propensity to enjoy my senses. But do we really know where this lust resides? And then Krishna explains in the next verse that yes, let me tell you the neighborhood, the street address where lust resides. It is next to your senses, your mind, and your intelligence. And then he talks about that hierarchy, that it goes from your senses to your mind to your intelligence. And then above all, it's your soul. So unless Prabhu, we understand who the enemy is, where does he reside, and then how to tackle, I think that's what Prabhupada says. Prabhupada, in one of the lectures, he said that his Guru Maharaj told Prabhupada that there is no real scarcity of resources. Often, as Govindev Prabhu said, that a lot of leaders, they talk about this phenomena, and the way they get the vote is that there is a scarcity of this thing and I'll be there. If you select me, I'll address that need. So Prabhupada's spiritual master says that there is no real scarcity of resources. The only scarcity is God consciousness. And in the same lecture, he says that wherever people who are Krishna conscious or God conscious, especially Krishna conscious, when you go there, we are respected. And we are respected not for the opulence that we have or whatever. I think we are only respected for just following those four principles that regulates our life. And Prabhu, that's my understanding of this message. I really loved Prabhupada's purport and heard a lecture on this as well.
Ishan, what does this term lust mean to a young guy like you? Does it make any sense at all? Or does it compute even?
So I think, and I'm pretty sure I've read this in the purport of a Bhagavad Gita verse, but I don't remember which one it was, where Prabhupada kind of talks about how all these four bad qualities come from the same root, right? If it's greed, it's always wanting more. Envy is because someone else has the more that you want, which is like coming from greed. Lust is also, again, wanting more and that kind of stuff. So I think that it's the fact that it all originates from the same place, and like the way Krishna described yesterday, that you just need to brute force your way through it to overcome it. I think that that's kind of what lust would mean in my books, is just something that arrives from this greed of always wanting more.
We've said it before that the appetites, the senses only know one word, and it's more. At the same time, we do need to eat. We do need to rest. We do need to have shelter. So where do you draw the line? When do you know that? How do you, and we're not supposed to have too little either. Yukta hara vihadasya, yukta chetasya. You shouldn't be stressed out about where to sleep, what to eat. And so there's a balance, obviously, here. And how do you come to know what that balance is in your life, and maybe individuals could talk about maybe what part of their life they're working on. Maybe there's a part of their life they want to increase in one area and decrease in another area, and what's their strategy for doing that?
Prabhuji, in the verse, it says, quote, "One should satisfy the senses only insomuch as required for self-preservation and not for sense gratification." I think that there is this balance that is required for you to kind of develop your way through Krishna consciousness. You can't only be spending all of your time just for God, because if you're only doing that, then you're obviously undermining your own health, which will, in the long run, hurt your ability to serve Krishna. So I think that there has to be this very, like, there's wearing clothes, and then there's wearing expensive clothes that you can use to show off how rich you are. There's, compared to wearing clothes just to keep yourself warm and make sure you don't get sick. So I think that it's this difference between needs and wants, and that kind of sweet spot that's in the middle, where you're not undermining your needs, but you're also not fueling your wants. And I think that that's where the balance kind of comes from. If you feel in any way, shape, or form that I want this because another person has it, or I want something better than what they have, right? I want like a really, really nice, luxurious car compared to, our neighbors, per se, then that's a want and not necessarily need. But you also need a car so you can get to the temple before the lecture begins. So I think that that's the sweet spot.
So you mentioned yourself that one of the reasons why our wants are artificially inflated is because of this sense of competing and comparing. So how do you deal with not being bothered by the fact that somebody else wears a smaller dress size than you, or is more athletic than you, or has a more nimble mind than you, or lives in a big house than you? How do you deal with that? Anybody, Ishan or anybody?
Sorry, I just wanted to add that Krishnam talked about this in his talk yesterday when he mentioned that when Hanuman was up against the demon, that just kept growing, and Hanuman was like, I'm going to grow more. And she was like, well, I have a boon, so I will grow more. And so they kept having this competition. And then Hanuman shrunk down and kept on his ground and stayed humble. And that's how he could move on, because he, shrunk. And so he was just so small that he could easily just go through her. And I think that that is just kind of is the way that you maintain it, is by staying humble and by staying rooted. And that way you always know kind of what you need if you've like struggled for something, for say, like if there was a time where you were, you couldn't get food, and like a lot of people are during this pandemic, then you kind of gain this humility that you don't need to be eating in those expensive restaurants and having really nice pasta every single dinner. But there's also this kind of sweet spot that you're not always, undermining yourself because you want to be helping someone else. So that's
Excellent. We've got Nirmala. She says, wise young man on our Facebook. Thanks, Nirmala. That was Ishan speaking, our wise young man. We have quite a few of them. Kusham Dimash joined us. Also, Bear Montes, Ram Kishore as well, and a couple of others. They've gone below my field of vision here. But
Well, can you check with Mataji whether she said for Ishan or for me?
I just take a wild guess. It'd be for Ishan. Sorry to disappoint you, but don't compare whatever you do. One thing that baffles me is that, we live in Spanish Fort, and, we don't have a lot of poverty here, anywhere in Utah for that matter, but not particularly in, limited number of homeless, a very low unemployment rate, a good per capita income. So I recognize that there are people who have less than the basics. I recognize that, but I'm just making a general statement or a general question. Trump campaigned in 2016, Make America Great Again. And I noticed that, my experience is everybody lives in a, even a construction worker, even people with, just a high school degree or less are living in a $300,000-$400,000 house. They're driving a $20,000 pickup. I don't know if it's all paid for or not. That most people are employed. There's very little employment rate. I mean, there's a level of prosperity that we've never seen before. And even if you're on welfare, most people in America, America on welfare are richer than 92% of the people in the world. So how come Trump gets elected on a slogan, "Make America Great Again"? I mean, where does it end? I mean, why aren't people satisfied? Is this what we're talking about? Like lust out of control?
It's an insatiable desire to be happy, and which never comes. So if you go back to Nectar of Instructions, verse 2 says, Atyahara prayashacha prajalpo niyama graha jana sanga chalolilam sadbir bhakti vinashati, right? So once devotion service is spoiled, when becomes too much entangled in those six activities of those, most important, all are six, but over endeavoring for mundane things more than necessary and eating and things. And this is what even projected in President Trump's campaign, right? We are happy, we are satisfied, and still we need more. We need to conquer world, right? So I'm going to make America great again. And our fundamental existence, and it starts from our childhood, the practice of getting engrossed in material activities and the the competitiveness in our mind. When the child is born like pristine, clean, knowing nothing about the material world, right? But the activities are enforced in his mind to be competitive, to be just having anxiety and stress, and that training starts from childhood. And that's where, like, getting born into devotee family versus getting born into uh, non-devotee family, there's a lot of difference. That training, starts from childhood, and that's how we are trained in this material world to be just anxious about things, running after this false happiness, which is never there. And what happens then? Our senses, are controlling our mind rather than mind controlling senses. Mind versus then our intelligence is lost. Intelligence is lost, then we don't realize that we are a soul. So this fundamental problem actually exists in the society. And unfortunately, we are a part of the society. Rather than fighting against, we tend to succumb to societal benefit, societal flow, and then lose our identity as an individual soul. And this is what is highlighted in this particular verse. And even in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, persons who are unknowledgeable falsely identify with gross material consciousness, right? And that's what we are doing, and are full of material designation. So this designation comes, I am president, I am prime minister, I am this, I am CEO of this company. They come with our false identification of our material designation. And that's what Krishna says, we are all manda, means we are lazy people not progressing towards devotional service. And this is the essence of our existence, this verse. What are we doing? Just running after material desire, material happiness, which are non-existence actually, which we don't realize.
Prahlad Maharaj says that the leaders of society in Kali Yuga, Nate Vidu Shvarta, they don't know the aim, they don't know the goal of life. And so because they don't know the real purpose of life, they whip people up into a frenzy of sense gratification, isn't it?
Yes.
And this is compared to, in the democratic process, what happens is the lesser animals will vote a bigger animal into office. Then the bigger animal promises the lesser animals more aggression in terms of pursuing sense gratification. A chicken in every pot, $50,000 pickup truck in the parking lot, a $500,000 house over your roof over your head. So the instead of keeping a neutral stance, or the politicians, it seems they whip the people up into a frenzy of selfishness. And Trump did it so much that there was a backlash. You know, people, they had so much of this selfishness that they actually wanted a little decency. You know, they actually wanted a little sensitivity, a little compassion. And so they didn't reelect him. But the basic way to get elected is to promise sense gratification. It has to be tempered with at least the appearance of compassion and sensitivity as well. But either way, it's not going to lead to reducing of needs and self-realization. The system is biased against it. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yes, Prabhu. I mean, the whole election stuff, if we have to be very specific, is about sense gratification, right? I will provide you this, I will provide you that. I mean, even scientifically, we think that, okay, I will make medical practices, easy for you, low income tax, low this, right? Everything is related to simple lifestyle. I mean, if we lead simple lifestyle, we don't need all that stuff. We don't need false promises there.
I think one thing that politicians can do to kind of quell the fever, and anyone can jump in at this point, is follow in the footsteps of the great Kaurava kings like the Pandavas who retired. Take Arjuna. He didn't want the position in the first place, isn't it? Even after having been mistreated, betrayed, stabbed in the back, conspired against, sent into the forest for 13 years, they still were willing to settle for 5 villages, the Pandavas. And when that was denied and the Duryodhana's armies came against him, Arjuna said, Yadimam apatikaram asastrasa, better me die unarmed and unresisting rather than commit myself for sense gratification. So, and then they retired, as soon as all this happened, because Krishna wanted a detached ruler in power. And then when Krishna left the planet, Yudhishthira and his brothers, they immediately retired, went to the Himalayas and put the kingdom on Maharaj Parikshit. Then Maharaj Parikshit, a few years later, I think Maharaj Parikshit ruled for like 30 years or something, and then he took advantage of the curse to leave also. So we don't find that attachment amongst any of the politicians, and that sends a very good message, I think, to people in general.
I just
What do you
wanted to
think?
add a small little thing, and it was that not only is there like you were mentioning that there is already so much prosperity in the country, I think that there's also like a need of this competitive nature also comes with saying that like the previous era was worse and that wasn't fulfilling. It's almost as if they're convincing the voters that you are not happy, even if there is prosperity in both like red and blue states, for example. There's still this need of saying that red states or whoever's running, that we promise you that our political party is going to do what the other party wasn't. And then they also go on to say that, this is why it was bad, even if you don't come into that saying, yes, like the economy is bad. If you personally think that the economy is doing fine, but then they come in, they say, look, the economy is doing terrible, blah, 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 blah. And I promise I will make it better. Then you kind of succumb to the fact that, yes, if that important person is saying the economy is bad, then it probably is. And so there's also this need of saying that you don't have the sense gratification that you want, and I can give it to you.
So even if things weren't so bad, they try to fabricate a story that they were bad to use that story to their own advantage.
Yeah, I mean,
In other words, they just say whatever they want, and then that becomes a new reality for them and their followers, isn't it?
I mean, America is known as capitalist country, right? This is the designation. So everything is material. I mean, if you even look at the newest senses we have facing problems, environment, climate change, pollution, healthcare, everything is controlled by capitalism here, actually. If you look at stuff, this automobile company, the pollution problem coming from emissions, CO2 emissions or carbon monoxide can be solved just by putting a carbon, converter there. But these oil companies, they will not let automobile company put that carburetor because the oil consumption will decrease. They don't want that. Likewise, in medical industry, they have cure of many things. These medical trials, many oftentimes, manipulated, uh, uh, all that stuff. And then they will not just don't advertise the proper medicine because let people suffer and we are going to gain money. We are going to get money out of it. And if you think about what oil company, medical, and then insurance, right? Insurance, just you have to have insurance, but yet when you go and claim your insurance, there are so many problems. So everything is not humanity, but capitalism. Just capitalism, it's just the material nature.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Govinda.
because of that capitalistic ethic that pervades U.S. culture, it's very difficult in the United States to live a simple life because there is so much pressure from so many different fronts to acquire and to raise your material standard of living. It's really what's expected, and it's just downright deviant to not buy into that. You really have to be, if you want to go live a simpler life, you'd have to be telling, in most circumstances I know of, you'd have to be telling all of the significant people in your life, I'm dropping out, I'm checking out, I'm not doing this anymore. And you see occasionally people will do that, but it's very unusual because the power of the force is so strong that everyone just gets sucked into it and end up putting themselves under all kinds of stress and anxiety so that they can match up to who they're supposed to be, because that's the ethic in the culture. More, like we said at the beginning. What I have is really, really great, but I'd like more.
Years ago, one of the researchers in a training mentioned that across the globe, he was talking about the social scenario in the capital markets. He was just trying to draw some connections. And his point is there are a lot of prominent emotions, and he talked about some of them. And finally, he said that two of those emotions, which are fear and greed. So if you talk about capital market, if you talk about communities, societies, political scenario, and sometimes even relationships, that these two emotions, which are fear and greed, sometimes you convince the other about what they can lose, which is the fear. Sometimes you can tell them that what they are going to gain from this relationship or from this opportunity. And then it takes swings. Like sometimes the fear wins, the other time the greed. So I really like that analogy, especially in the context of the material world, the capital mindset, that you just try to hit those 2 points of greed and fear. And wherever you try to hit the nail, and if you do a good job, that's the emotion that wins the race.
That's called advertising. Come on, please.
Yes, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. So I just wanted to add that I think this whole sense gratification comes in because of the fact that we do not know why we were born or why we came into this world. That understanding is missing. I had seen a foreword which said that we had actually come to understand ourselves, our soul, and our connection with the Lord. But we just met the whole world and we went back without really understanding that relationship or our consciousness. So it's important to understand why we have come into this world so that we can answer these questions as to what we should do, because then we can understand if sense gratification is important or not. And I remember that Swami Vivekananda, he actually he could not reach the whole public, so he would try and meet the leaders of all of these small villages. because he felt that if he can get through to them, then they can set an example in their own communities and explain to the people of how life should be led. See, he would travel across and spend time actually explaining to those kings and the panchayats of what life is supposed to be, how he's supposed to lead it, and he would keep traveling like that. So it takes me back to once Ishan's lecture where he was saying that when a person is in a higher position, they can influence a lot of people very well because what they say is understood as truth. But if they say this is happening, then people will not go and do so much research. They'll just agree that when we say that the state of the country is not that great, they're like, okay, if he's saying it, there should be some value. So it's important to actually teach those leaders or people who are at a higher position to understand why we are here, what life is, how we should lead it, because they can spread it because they can communicate to a lot of people and people actually look up to them. So I think the root goes on to understanding why we've come to this world and explaining it to those people so that they can reach out to the masses.
I have a quote that I'd like your opinion on, but in the meantime, let me share with you what Bear Montes wrote on Facebook. We work so much to pay that mortgage off, the home, the car payments, and insurance. So you kill yourself working for what media put in your mind over and above what you need. That was her comment. And Kusham Demon says, nice discussion, spread positive thoughts all over the world. So Kusham, here's a paragraph by Prabhupada. Your comments, please. Prabhupada says, foolish politicians who hold political administrative posts think that the temporary posts they occupy are the highest material gain of life, and therefore they stick to those posts even up to the last moment of life. I heard Nehru, even after 3 heart attacks, he wouldn't give up the post of prime minister. Heart attack, stroke, he was a vegetable, but he was still holding on to the prime ministership. Anyway, going on here, they stick to those posts even up to the last moment of life without knowing that achievement of liberation as one of the associates of the Lord is the highest gain of life. So there's the why. The human life is meant for achieving this end. The Lord has assured us in the Bhagavad Gita many times that going back to Godhead, his eternal abode, is the highest achievement. Your thoughts?
Prabhuji, so I'm reading the book, The Journey Home, and there's a quote which says that it's the nature of the mind to consider non-essentials as essential. So we've got so used to these things around us that we feel this position is essential for us. We feel all of these things that we have are so we've made it important. It's all the mind is playing games with us. So it's that's where again controlling the senses and controlling the mind comes, because then the mind will start making you play according to what it wants and not what you should be doing. Please add to this.
And not only that, but if you don't desire those things that you don't actually need, people will view you as though you're mentally ill. I mean, seriously, the attitude is, what is wrong with you? Why do you not want to come skiing for the 5th day in a row? You don't get it. I mean, and nobody likes to, it's very, very uncomfortable to feel so deviant. I mean, you're an abnormal personality.
You don't have to go too far, bro. I can give you my own example. When I go to India, visit my family, I don't show my Brahminic thread actually. I don't show them. They don't know. Because the moment they see that Brahminic thread, they will show something wrong with me. What happened? So many questions.
So you converted.
I'm converted.
And how did that happen in the United States of all places?
My friend Cheeman, he had been living in Los Angeles. He was kicked out of Uganda when Idi Amin kicked all the Indians out of Uganda. So he came to Los Angeles and he started insurance business. And then he bought gradually hard work, he bought a condo and got himself established. And then after being in America, say 15 years or so, he was in a position that his relatives could visit him from Africa and from India. He could put them up and have a place to stay. So as soon as, and he'd become a devotee. And so as soon as his relatives would come from Africa or India, they'd say, let's go to Universal Studios, let's go to Disney World, let's go to Las Vegas. And how do we get there? You know, can you drive us? And Cheeman said, yeah, I'll look it up on the map. And they're like, you live here? You live in Los Angeles? And you mean to say you've never been to Vegas? You've never been to Disneyland? Then why did you come to America in the first place?
I had my photo on my WhatsApp, right? You can upload a photo with tilak in a stuff, and then sometimes you get connected with your old school friends and something. And then this was like 2 years back, and I received so many telephone calls. Oh, Ramesh, everything is fine. How is your family doing? Do you have a family? And I had to explain them. Yeah, I am happily married. I have two wonderful boys. They are doing great. Okay, they're very intelligent and all that stuff. Just by just putting a tilak, they think that I am just totally gave up. I am sannyasi actually, and that is the conception. And unfortunately, in many Indian families back home.
Well, don't let them see the video of Krishan giving the talk last night, whatever you do.
Yeah, they should be inspired by that, but they don't. One time I sent a video last year, like 1.5 years ago, I sent that video, and oh, wonderful! He speaks so nice English.
Not a word about the subject matter.
And one of the funny comments was, "Oh, he speaks like Americans."
Silpi, do you have any kind of stories to tell about interactions with family members overseas, or anything about balance?
Yes, yeah, I
Yeah.
do. Like, most of you probably do know my life's kind of story, but like people think like I go to temple, I do this thing more. Am I depressed? Am I trying to fighting depression and stuff like that? Like, no, I'm very happy doing that. So I do it because it gives me happiness, and like nothing that I'm depressed. So that's why I'm taking this different path. But like taking this different path has given me like lots of happiness and enlightenment in my life. That's what I tell them. So they said like, oh, you don't do this anymore. Like, what? Everything is okay with you? Like, yes, everything is good. It's better actually.
Because you don't do those things anymore, now you're on a real path to happiness.
Right, exactly.
Prabhuji, there's this very funny story that I have. So we were doing kirtan in India, and we had the local temples devotees. They were over, and they had this amazing setup. There were speakers, and we had mics on the harmonium and mics on the mridang. And fortunately, I had a wonderful mridang player there with me. So, and he asked, he's like, you should do an upbeat kirtan because it's midday and be awesome. I was like, okay. I was doing an upbeat kirtan, and there's a bunch of people there. And in the back, I saw my relatives, and it was very, very fast. And in fact, I actually thought that the speakers were almost too loud for me. I was looking in the back, and I could see at least 10 or like 20 of my relatives in the back sleeping. And I was like, how is this possible? Because I thought it was very, very loud. And after it ended, they were all complimenting me. So
Where was that? Where was that took place?
So it was
Jaipur.
yeah.
Before. So your relatives were pretending to be asleep, you think?
I hope so, Prabhu.
That's the positivity, Ishan, you want. They were pretending to be asleep, but they were not listening to your talk or kirtan.
I went to Jaipur, I think 75, 76, and always look forward to going to the Mangal Arti at 5 o'clock, because there were thousands of people, very exuberant, very enthusiastic, dancing, singing. And a few years later, probably in the 80s, I went back to Jaipur, and I was excited. I couldn't wait to get up and go to Mangal Arti. I arrived there in the morning at Radha Govindaji Temple, and there were just a fraction of the people that had been there in the past. just instead of thousands of people, there were just a couple of dozen people. I said, what happened? How come everybody's not here? I said, I was here like 5 years ago and there were hundreds of people. Now there's just a few people. What happened? And they said, television. Television has come to Jaipur. So people stay up late at night watching I Love Lucy, so that then they can't make Mangalarti in the morning.
Progress.
I think mentioning television, that's like probably a big factor in whipping people up, you know, for sense gratification. It's the big tool of Maya, her number one weapon of mass destruction. It's television.
It has destroyed the whole society, actually, television.
So what do you think? Let me get your comments on this quote by Prahlad Maharaj. He says, the materialistic way of life is something like a grinding stone, and we are being crushed by it. We have fallen into this whirlpool of tossing waves of life, and thus, my Lord, I pray at your lotus feet to call me back to your eternal abode as one of your servitors. This is the summit liberation of this materialistic way of life. I have very bitter experience of the materialistic way of life. In whatever species I have taken birth, compelled by the force of my own activities, I have very painfully experienced two things, namely, separation from my beloved and meeting with what is not wanted. I'll just repeat that. The two painful things, separation from my beloved and meeting with what is not wanted. Then he ends up by saying, to counteract them, the remedies which I undertook were more dangerous than the disease itself. What do you think about that? Anybody?
Separated from Krishna, beloved. Experience that. That's what is.
Because our attraction for the things of this world is an indirect attraction for Krishna, isn't it?
Because everything is Krishna.
It says, Devi hiya shagunamayi mai. The reason that we're attracted to matter and to enjoy matter in terms of sense gratification is because that matter is Krishna's energy, and because Krishna is all attractive, his energies are also attractive too. But to experience Krishna indirectly, or to want to enjoy Krishna's energies without recognizing Krishna, can never be a formula for happiness, can it?
But also Prabhu, even if it's Krishna's energy, every matter he resides, but these are his reflections, right? And then, which means illusion. So even if Krishna is there, these are his reflections, and then we are running after reflections, we are running after illusions, and we are not gonna get to the reality, and that's what's happened. We're never getting. So we should go after the reality, the essence, which is Krishna himself, rather than running after his reflections.
Right. Pavana, Kama made a good point also, along with Ras Vilas here, that we haven't considered why. Why are we here? Before we take a course of action or strategize or design our life, we should first, I think you'll agree, answer the question, why? And in fact, psychologists like Carl Gustav Jung and others have said that if you don't ask this question, get an answer, and act according to the information, according to the reason that you're created, it's going to, you may go along for a while as long as your senses are strong and your hormones are raging. But what we know as midlife crisis, it all comes crashing down because more of your life is behind you than ahead of you. And you realize that you have not stepped up to the plate and recognized, identified, and acted according to the purpose that you're here. If you don't ask the why and you don't fulfill your purpose, it has devastating effects come 45, 50 years old. Have you seen that in your practice?
Oh, yes. Yes, and actually Carl Jung is my favorite psychologist because he does address the issue of connecting with God and how important that is for a productive life. And without God, you're lost. And he acknowledges that. And he's in his time, he was considered kind of a rogue, you know, because he's talking about God and everybody else is talking about the ego and the id and all this other stuff. And he's talking about God. He says, if you don't have that connection with God on a personal level, you'll be lost. And I totally, you know, a lot of what I do with my clients is in the path of what Carl Jung did. You know, we've got to be God conscious, otherwise we will be lost.
And the regret, the disquietude can be crushing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you're not connected with God, then all kinds of horrible things happen. You get addicted to drugs, alcohol, whatever, sense gratification. That's what happens if you have no God connection.
But even if you haven't committed sins over, you know, if you don't have specific bad choices, you've lived a fairly good life, a fairly moral life, you've lived a life of relative restraint, isn't it a fact that just the hole in your life, just the lack of fulfillment itself can lead one to severe depths of depression in mid and later life?
That's exactly right. If you don't feel like you have what you need, being God, right, first and foremost. Well, I talk to a lot of people and they talk about that very void, in like this hole in their heart, because they're lost. They don't have that direction. They don't have that commitment.
Great.
That's what Carl Jung was all about.
Cool. Kamal, don't go away, because I was going to ask you. Everything starts from asking why and going to the right sources to get an answer. And yet politicians, I can't see a politician either getting elected or getting reelected based on a platform of genuine God consciousness. I mean, they all pay lip service to it. They go to church. But if they were to actually suggest that people reduce their material needs and increase their practice of God consciousness, they wouldn't have a chance, would they? So what to do? It all hinges on the leaders, and yet it seems like the leaders are compromised by the very setup that they're involved in.
That's absolutely true, Charu Prabhu. That it's very difficult, and I think that's where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where he said that we have to spread this message. There are so many people who are not aware, and iskcon does a wonderful job where it's trying to spread this message of God, try to spread this message of consciousness among the people, because you need to ignite this within the people as well for them to see it. If they don't understand it themselves, they'll just consider you crazy. And as Josh Prabhu also said, people will not be able to relate to this whole concept. So it's important that we keep spreading and keep trying to educate people about this other path, apart from our regular life that we live of comparison and just wanting more for ourselves. The problem is where lust comes in is we are so used to wanting things for ourselves and not for God. So when we see something beautiful, we don't realize that it's God's creation. We just appreciate it. That okay, this is so beautiful. This painting is so beautiful. But the fact that God actually gave that painter the art to do this is forgotten. So we've lost that second connection. So it's firstly, it's important to make people realize that there is God and He is the source. And once that seed starts growing in people's hearts, then they'll be able to connect, because in today's world, they're not even able to connect. They just think you're from a totally different place altogether. So I think spreading the message is one of the ways, is what I can think of.
So Prahlad says it's two sources of misery: being separated from his beloved, and being connected with unwanted things. So our preaching is meant to bring about such a change in people in general that they get connected with their beloved and they get separated from the unwanted things. And when and if enough people get a taste for that, then they'll vote the politicians out of office in favor of ones that are more God conscious, as long as we have democracy.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Silpi, something, anything, we'd love to hear from you.
About the materialism nature of people, that's never ending, right? Like we are really just gets looped into it, like every festival that comes around, like even the Christmas, right? You have like, I have taught my kids that birthdays are not about gifts, Christmas is not about gifts. I actually have like made that rule, like get what you need. I'll buy the stuff that you need. I'm not gonna buy extra or surprises and stuff. So I mean, that's what I'm trying to teach my kids, to live a simple minimal life, like just go by your needs. I do not submit to this kind of buying more, getting more kind of stuff. So yeah, and politics, I don't want to comment much on that. So.
I don't know about Christmas. I don't know what my wife has in mind, but for my birthday last October, she got me a pillow. I don't know if that's considered
No, that's probably you need
a
it,
luxury
right?
or a necessity.
That you're gonna use, right? Something that you're gonna need, as something that you're gonna use. But like just like for the kids, like I'm just talking about in kids term, like where there's like tons of toys. Like I did not grow up with these toys. I'm fine. I did not need it. That I had people around me. I have other books and stuff to read and do stuff. But just these days, it's just so much material stuff that's around us, and the culture that promotes it. Like Halloween, dress up this, and then again next year, different costume again. Like why? And and so much waste that goes around with it. So like I live on a path that where I'm reducing my carbon footprint and trying to teach my kids the same thing. You do not need so much, just little is fine. Like whatever, just like how Ishan was talking, it's something that you need and something that you want, kind of stuff. So I'm trying to get rid of the want, and like if we can have more leaders which create, like satisfy the need in a good way, and not like, I don't know, it's just the people around us too, like they will see this thing, they want that competition. Like how do you really get rid of that? And in my experience, I would say, like if you just connect more to the God, this thing disappears and you don't even know. This competition, this wanting more, just disappears. But if there's people can just find the happiness by serving the Lord or eating the prashadam, I think that has changed my life. So like just listening to the Maha Mantras and having the prashadam, that kind of helped me get out of this materialistic want kind of stuff. Like, okay, this person has this, why don't I have it? People do go through that cycle, and it's hard for them to break it. And these kind of religious activities and be connected to people and God helps that. If you just see everybody as your family and extend not just to your needs, but everybody else's need. Like, it's just not your need, that matters most. Like if somebody else is in the need, go help them. Try to, like, somebody doesn't have food, instead of you eating in an expensive restaurant, give them some money or like donate some food to help their cause. So these kind of stuff that would humble us and help us get out of this vicious cycle of competition and wanting more.
Do you think that, probably not with all people, but do you think with some people, the principle of envy could lead them to Krishna consciousness? In other words, if we become so peaceful, so joyful, so loving as devotees, we let our light shine so brightly, then do you think that some people would become envious of us and reduce their needs in order to get what we have. After all, that's pretty much how the movement started. You know, we kids were born in wealthy families. We had best schools. We had silver spoons in our mouths, but we basically changed our lifestyle in order to have what Prabhupada had, in order to be what Prabhupada did. So do you think the tendency to compare and to envy could work to our favor if we become better devotees?
Yeah,
Prabhuji, if
go ahead.
oh sorry,
And then go
sorry to
ahead.
interrupt you, but it's just really funny because a lot of like I've convinced a lot of my closer friends to try going vegetarian for a week or try going like vegetarian for even like a few days, and all of them have reported back to me saying I almost fainted like 30 seconds in. So I
30 seconds.
it's
I mean,
think
normally they go for at least 3 or 4 hours without a meal, right? So 30 seconds? Is the mind at work here, do you think, a little bit?
Just
The uncontrolled mind?
State of mind.
The mind who's your worst enemy?
And then I have my vegetarian friends in India, and then when I tell them that I like rarely eat garlic or rarely eat onions, then they go like double crazy. Like, yeah, how like at this point you're just eating grass, aren't you? And so
Some people, no matter like how much you shine or do, it doesn't make sense to them unless they have tried it themselves with a good heart. Okay, no, I'm not just trying it to just show off, but for real, that I want to do it. That want has to come from within. And just by us setting as an example, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be like bees coming to flower, right? So we could be just a flower, just do what we can do, and people can come. So
So the fundamental concept that um, devotional service, or devotional life, and regular life are different is wrong in the society. Once we live a simple life, we are devotional. So they are very much integrated. As long as that message is conveyed and people try to follow, then there is no discrepancy between people leading devotional life versus people living a sumptuous life in society. You can still be sumptuous, but the definition of sumptuous is wrongly defined in the society, and that's the fundamental reason the why we have these problems, like simple lifestyle versus devotional life. And then other thing is, as Srila Prabhupada says, society tend to follow their leaders, and if the leaders are corrupted, then society will be corrupted. That's why we have from scripture Janak Maharaj, set by an example, Lord Ram, Dasarath, Prithu Maharaj. But in today's society, in the minimum qualification to become a leader is that you have to be, a criminal record. Otherwise, you cannot be a leader.
No, that's not fair. You don't have to be a criminal, but you do have to have a massive ego. And how are those people? That's the fundamental requirement. You can't just be I'm just an ordinary guy, or even have a height. You have to have such drive to promote yourself that you get those kinds of people in positions of leadership, and the goose is cooked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that on the internet after the election, there was a little thing where Kamala Harris was calling on her cell phone, and she's saying, "Congratulations, Joe! Congratulations! You did it! You're the president of the United States." And I know that when you work hard for months and months and invest, of course there's got to be a sense of victory, that all that didn't go in vain. But otherwise, the whole idea of celebrating, to me, it doesn't make sense, because now it's such a burden. You've got the whole concerns and responsibilities of the whole country on your shoulders. So that would be an extremely sobering moment for me. That would not be a cause of celebration at all. And it's always baffling to me to wonder why people would seek that,
Yeah.
You could be drafted, like Plato says. You know, you find your detached wise people and you go and you convince them to sacrifice for 4 years to lead the people. But why someone would seek that and then celebrate, that's beyond me.
Yeah, it's like a moment of reality. Oh my gosh, we've actually been elected. Oh, that's going to be a big job. Yeah.
And then they get 1/6 of the karma of their constituents as well. That would also be quite sobering.
And there is big job for any newcomer or re-elected person, because what I define is the society is never at steady state. Once the society is at steady state, things are, you don't have any work to do, right? You just guide the society. But society is always unsteady, always fluctuating. There are disturbances, there are problems. And that's why there's a lot of work for leaders, so-called, and they further create confusions.
But if your reason for going into politics is self-promotion and expansion of your false ego, and is not so much to serve the people, then you're not going to get stressed out when you get that big job through politics, and you're going to feel like I won. And well, the reason, Caru, that you'd be feeling the weight of responsibility if you receive that position is because you have a conscience. You'd be very conscientious about serving properly to serve the people. I can't hardly even imagine having that responsibility. But I think the people, that's why the system is just kind of rigged against ultimate success, is the people that eventually get there, they don't really care. You never hear politicians talking and get a real sense that they actually care about human beings, the real people. It's just they're just sort of part of the landscape.
And from their point of view, against the state of mind, what they come up with is the I am the leader versus I am the servant, right? And that's the differences.
Right.
They come as the leader, right? I am leading. No, you lead by example. You are servant of people.
Exactly.
Wow, talk about politics and it really gets exciting, huh?
I just want to tell one thing to Ishan. Ishan, I really love pasta.
Could I mention just one other thing, going back about 5 minutes to what do you do to kind of convince people of your position? How do you get people to drop the materialistic way of life and to follow a different path? And it's just something that happened last night. Hanuman Prabhu is in Salt Lake City right now. I think many people on this call know him. And he's staying at a place very close by the temple. And he showed up last night with someone who had never met devotees before. He'd never been to a Krishna temple before. And I ended up spending quite a bit of time talking to this guy, Cody. He's from Oklahoma. He's been living in Salt Lake for quite a while. And just by Hanuman's having engaged in discussion with him and inviting him to the temple, he was blown away. I think he felt like he had been transformed that night. He got one of Kapil's complimentary Bhagavad Gitas, which he was very excited to take home and read. He sat there while we all read together in the temple of 35 people or so, just reading through the second half of the 18th chapter. And he loved the arti. He loved Krishna's talk. He said, this is just amazing. He could not talk enough. So long story short, I think you have to somehow let someone experience the higher taste. And if they can experience the higher taste, and there's so many different ways that can potentially happen, that is really what people will say, wow, no wonder those people are shining like that, or whatever.
Last Saturday also.
Either that or we make our own brand of soap.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But I thought Hanuman taught me, and I mean, he didn't say anything about it. That I just met this guy, and he's here, and introduced me. But I thought, wow, Hanuman's he's a real missionary.
Last Saturday, he also brought for one person. He never been to temple, and then he was in the queue, and then he said, "Oh, I just want a little bit of rice." So we gave him a little bit of rice, and then he came back. He said, "I want more of those." And then he said, "Prabhu, I want more." He used the word Prabhu, so he heard that people are addressing each other with Prabhu or Mataji. So, so yeah, people do get transformed when they come to temple, and when they have people like Govinda Prabhu to receive them and talk to them. So definitely.
Yeah, give yourself credit, Govinda, for being a good host, for not finding something else to do.
Sure.
Prabhupada said there's wet grass, dry grass, and moist grass. If a spark falls in wet grass, it'll go out. So some people, you could preach to them, for 24 hours and it would just roll off them. They're like wet grass. And there are those who are like dry grass. We see some people, it's like they've been waiting their whole lives to meet the devotees. And as soon as they meet the devotees, they move into the temple or they start practicing in their home. They're very strict. It's like a fish getting back into water. And that's like dry grass. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's what the missionaries live for, is to meet somebody like that. If you meet even one or two people like that in your whole life, your life is successful. And then there's the moist grass, and when the spark falls in the moist grass, it may catch or it may not. It just depends. So most people are in that middle area, and it depends in large measure how good a devotees we are, how much joy, how much peace we have, and then how much time we're willing to take them under our wing and mentor them and guide them. And I think most people are probably in that middle category. At least a lot of them are out there, and we still need to get to them or bring them. Any final comments before we wrap up here with a kirtan from?
I think there is a lot of opportunity, as we were talking with Govinda Prabhu last night. There were like 35 people, and I think more than 20 of them were new people. So which is good sign. And I would say those who are regular, like among us, we should pay attention to these people, preach them, and then talk to them like George Prabhu does, Sundari Priya Mataji, Amrita does. And I think we have great future there in terms of preaching and congregation.
We'd like to thank Ishan and Krishna also for stepping up, and we hope that they will do regular talks, because if someone's going to come into Krishna consciousness, they have to be able to envision themselves participating or engaging in some way. And I don't think there's anything more compelling than to have young people like yourself getting up there and giving a wonderfully lucid and logical and compelling talk. I think that is like rolling out the red carpet for just about everybody. Thank you for being willing to do that, and I hope that you'll allow us to continue to schedule you in the future.
I would even go to the extent, Prabhu, that to propose that we make Ishan as youth leader. I know he's applying for colleges soon, but I think that would be a good strategy. They are rolling. They are role models, and they can lead other youth in the community. Even the best thing is, they're brought up here, born and brought up. They can set up an example for Western kids also.
Well, I certainly
Prabhu,
think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I would just like to thank Caru Prabhu, and I'm 100% sure that Krishna probably feels the same way, for giving us this opportunity to go out and kind of test the water. And so obviously there's a lot of learning that both of us still have to do. And I think that it's very, very nice of you to give us this opportunity that both Krishna and I can use. And hopefully both of us will continue on our track and become better and better. And so I just like to thank you, and I'm sure that Krishna would do the same.
Other amazing thing, Ishan, I want to highlight is This is what we grown up need to learn from you guys. In last 1 hour, you have mentioned Krishna's name for 7 times, even if Krishna is not here. And I saw Krishna mentioning your name in his talk yesterday. And this is what we want. This is really amazing thing, actually. You guys are acknowledging each other, appreciating, and that's what we need to learn in the society, in the community. How can we learn to get along, move, and appreciate each other? That was one of the topics, like I know 6 weeks back we discussed in this call. Appreciating each other.
And we'll continue to discuss it as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So Govinda Dev told me that Amrita Sundari is leading the kirtan, but I haven't seen her yet. Is it yourself then that's going to finish up with the kirtan, Ras Vilas, or is Amrita?
Yeah, she puts on my shoulders oftentimes.
Okay.
She can do. She's here.
She's coming? Okay.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Please
Hare
accept my
Krishna.
humble obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Hari Hari Bol.
So
Thanks
nice to see all of you.
Thanks to Bear Montes and Kusham Demon for joining us. Ram Kishore. Let's see, we had likes also from Richard Vaninath. Bobby Srivastav, my old friend from Los Angeles. Pujan Set from Australia. Liked Nirmala Devi, as well as Hari Bhajan Das. So people dropping in onto the Facebook Live aspect of it from all over the world, liking and commenting. You can check that out later.
Hare
Hari Hari Bol.
Thank you, Amrita Sundari, for your beautiful
Thank you.
kirtan. Ras Vilas, for your wonderful insights. Govinda Dev, for your insights and for beginning the kirtan. And of course, we don't even have to thank a psychologist for her insights. That's just a given. That's what psychologists trade in insights.
Mataji keeps us on track.
Yeah.
I try. I
And
try
also,
really hard.
and also Kamal, wonderful. Thank you. Kamal, the Kamal comments were
Thank you.
great. And Shilpi, thank you so much. Shilpi, you enriched the discussion. And who else? Did I miss anybody? I don't think
Kapil
so.
Prabhu and Ishan.
Kapil and
Of
Ishan.
course. Yeah, of course. I mean, duh. Yeah, I mean, Ishan is like the moon in the sky there. And the the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree there. So Kapil and Ishan, thank you so much for your insights, your contributions. Not enough can be said about those families that have up and coming sons who are communicating, expressing Krishna consciousness. Thank you very much. Next week it'll be the 11th verse in the second chapter if you want to look at it. Think about it a little bit, make a few notes, pitch in next week. Of course, on Friday it's Gita Jayanti from 4 o'clock. They'll be chatting of just the Sanskrit slokas of the Gita, not the translation to the purports. But even so, it's estimated to take between 2.5 and 3 hours to do that. The verses are, Govinda Bhakta said, they'll be projected on a screen. So either you have the Gita in front of you or you can read the verses on the screen. And after that recitation of the verses of the Gita will be concluded, there'll be arti, which will be, we can't give a set time for it, but it'll be sometime between 6:30 and 7, followed by prasadam. And then the day after, the regular Saturday feast, and Sundari Priya Mataji will be the one giving the talk on that particular day. Anything anybody else has to add or to announce?
We all want to thank you for this opportunity.
It's my honor. I look forward to these get-togethers every week. It's just so special to spend time with you like this. And
But
imagine it wouldn't have happened without COVID, so go figure.
But we miss you in Salt Lake City, Prabhu.
Well, next week after Sundari Priya, I'm back. I'm glad I haven't had to negotiate the snow a couple of times. Anyway. All right, thank you so much again. And if you would be so inclined, we'll all chant the Maha Mantra and then Panchakalpatarubhyasya. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram
Ram,
Hare Hare.
Panchakalpatarubhyasya, Kripa Sindhubhya,
Namo Namaha.